Second thing we needed to do was to find new efficiencies to maintain services at lower cost. And this, I believe, and this is one of my big complaints with the Harrisburg Press Corps, this is the untold story of the administration. Prior to the recession, prior to this fiscal year or last fiscal year, we had cut $1.75 billion annually out of the operating cost of the government. $1.75 billion. That enabled us during those years to use that money to fund programs, to fund our increased spending in education, to fund some of the energy initiatives, to fund some of the healthcare initiatives. But that put us in great shape to weather this storm, and we continued to do those efficiencies. Consider, and again, I want to look at my notes just to make sure I get these facts correctly. Consider the absolutely stunning facts that we now have. By the way, this is the third state budget in the last 50 years that spent less than its prior budget, third in 50 years. Our administrative spending this year is 9% lower than last year, 9%. But the most amazing fact of all is that our administrative spending, our overhead, what it costs to run the government, what we call in the budget general government operations, is now less in real dollars, not adjusted for inflation, less than the year before I became governor. So we have done a great, great job in finding efficiencies to deliver a level of service, but at a lower cost. The third goal that we had was the one that we have failed miserably, and that was to increase revenues modestly to ensure that the most vulnerable Pennsylvanians were cared of, that education progress continues, and that we have a balanced budget for this year and next. As you know, one of the reasons the budget stalemate lasted so long is I put down two markers. When I took the PIT off the table, which still would have been the best and fairest way for us to go as a state, but there was no support even within my own party for the PIT increase. When I took it off the table, I said to the legislature, I will sign a budget that does two things, that has no further cuts in education, that upgrades the basic education subsidy by $300 million, that has no further cuts to health care, and that balances, that has enough recurring revenue to balance this year, which is a constitutional requirement, and balance next year as well, because I didn't want to be back doing the same thing. Well, the legislature, after 101 days, finally did all of that. But they did it with a hodgepodge of sin taxes. Taxes on raising the cigarette tax, taxing cigarillos for the first time, redirecting cigarette tax that had gone into the M-Care fund, and then by instituting table games and a number of other small things that had some level of recurring revenues, like the tax amnesty program. It was a way to do it without real pain, because if you don't gamble and you don't smoke, you're likely not to have paid much more taxes as a Pennsylvanian. It raised us about $1 billion in recurring revenue. If the economy recovers, and we have predicted zero growth for this current fiscal year, it's a very conservative prediction. The Republicans, for all of their claims to be conservative, they had a budget with a 1% growth in it. So far in the first 4 months, we've lost about $300 million in expected revenue. We're running below. But most economists expect in the second half of the year, growth will return. So I think it'll balance out at zero growth. If we get zero growth and we settle this table games thing in the next week or two, we will probably just have enough to inch by and balance next year's budget.